Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. I have the honor to introduce to the briefing room Her Excellency, Madam President of the General Assembly, Ms. María Fernanda Espinosa. So without further ado, Madam President, you have the floor. Thank you.
Buenos días a todos y a todas. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Good morning, everyone. I started this morning at 8 a.m. With a working breakfast. One of the issues we discussed was about multilingualism in the House. And there is a long way to go still to make sure that every official language in the House has its space and it's fully respected. So good morning, everyone. Happy Women's Day. When I say Happy Women's Day, sometimes, I have mixed feelings. I just deliver a statement on the official celebration of Women's Day, and I say I have mixed feelings because we say Happy Women's Day, but there's so many, depressing statistics, painful situations around the world. But I wouldn't if you want the specifics, we can talk about that. It's been a long time since I haven't, had the opportunity to have a conversation with you. I want to thank you because I am getting close to my first 6 months of tenure as president. And I'm saying I want to thank you because you have covered the work of the General Assembly and of the Office of the President. You have shown interest, commitment, in showing commitment to the work we do at the General Assembly and the work I do as president. Really shows that you care about the organization, about the impact of our work, about the efficiency that we are very much striving for. So my opening remarks are going to be very, very succinct, and then we will open the floor for questions. And also very much looking forward, my communications team and Monica, this is totally not part of the script today, but really feel free to give me feedback, to tell, very frankly, how I can improve my work. How do you see it from the outside? I'm really very, very open and would be very grateful if I can get feedback from you because you are the antennas of the organization in a way. So it's very nice to see you again and to have the opportunity to interact with you. And this is, of course, a very special day for us women, but I think it's a very special day for humanity. If we are not to reach full gender parity, full rights for women and girls around the world, I think it's really not worthwhile because we are leaving behind 50% of the world's population. So the theme for this year's commemoration of International Women's Day, as you know, is Think Equal, Build Smart, Innovate for Change. And I think it just that very title really speaks by itself. As you know, this has been a very, very intensive and busy session. Right now, my team and I are preparing for next week for the WomenInPower event, which will take place at the General Assembly on Tuesday, the 12th of March. I am really very grateful to the heads of state and government who are participating. 6 women heads of state and government will be in New York next week, but also other leaders, ministers of states, representatives of the international organizations, and civil society. We organized the event in a way of having young female leaders as well interacting in an intergenerational mentoring kind of format. So we are very pleased that we had such a good response from women leaders from around the world. The presidents of Croatia, Estonia, Lithuania, Nepal, Trinidad, and Tobago will be here, as well as the Prime Minister of Iceland, the Vice Presidents of Colombia and Costa Rica, and the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, Federica Mogherini, the former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, among other female leaders. My message for this event is clear. And the message is that women are still vastly underrepresented in leadership positions around the world, and it is high time to change it for good. Currently, as we know, 5% of all prime ministers worldwide are female, and not more than 5% are presidents in the world are women. 5%, not good enough. We all know by now that when women are leading, everybody wins. It is high time to ensure more women get to positions of power. That is basically the discussion we will have on the 12th of March. We will have an opportunity to ask questions directly to the heads of state and government, and we invited them for a brief conversation with you, with UNCA on the 12th of March at 12:30, so you will have the opportunity to have a direct interaction with all of them. This will be one of the many high-level events we will have based on my 7 priorities. I will not repeat my 7 priorities because you know them by heart by now. And I will share other dates with you for your diary, for you to keep, to write it down in your agendas. On 28th of March, we will have a meeting on climate and future generation, which I will host. It is a mandate to the President of the General Assembly through a resolution coming from member states. Next month in April, on the 10th of April, we will celebrate the 100th anniversary of the International Labour Organization, ILO, here in New York, with a high-level meeting on the future of work and decent work for all. And in partnership with the World Health Organization, I will host a multi-stakeholder event on universal health coverage here at the UN on the 29th of April. Universal health coverage, as you know, is going to be one of high-level events for the upcoming high-level week in September. I think that we have challenging months ahead of us, but I also sense a collective determination by member states to use the opportunities we have to strengthen multilateralism. And you have seen me go on and on and on and on about the importance of a strong multilateral system, a strong international rules-based system. The interactions I have led in recent months and the engagements and consultations towards the high-level week in September all reinforce the importance member states attach to collective action and cooperation to solve global challenges. We can think globally for the sake of progress locally, of course. My presidents will continue to work under the acronym of DARE. I'm sure that you also remember that very well. DARE in order to foster delivery, accountability, relevance, and efficiency. And for that, I will continue to count on you and your excellent work to tell the world that the General Assembly is doing and how the UN is working to achieve a better world and be relevant to all. So thank you very much. If you want to know a little more about my recent visits to Finland and the European Union, I'll be glad to provide you with more information also about that. So thank you very much for your presence here.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The first question goes to Anka, and then Valeria Robeco, please. And then afterwards I have you and you. Yes, and thank you very much. I see your hands. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam President, on behalf of ANCA for this press conference, and happy Women's Day. So with technology and innovation playing a fundamental role in our everyday lives, how these two factors can represent an opportunity for gender equality? And nevertheless, could they potentially represent a risk if they're not well handled? Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Madam President.
Well, the data, the numbers that we have are not very encouraging because we see that one of the areas in which women are really have been excluded is in the area of science and technology. And we have brought today to the UN very powerful science women, but if you look at the numbers, they're very low. Very low because these are the professions that were left to the men. but we see that it is absolutely, there is no proof, but on the contrary, that women can really be at the forefront of innovation, of technology. We have hundreds of examples around the world. And basically, you say that it can also be a risk. Indeed, but science and technology and new technologies and the fourth industrial revolution, if not addressed properly, can be really challenging, for example, for the future of work. You know, for the societal fabric. It can alter social relations, but I think this is an independent challenge than the one of having the women fully participate in the making of new science and innovation, but also as beneficiaries of new technological developments as well. And that's basically where the conversation stands. We need more women scientists, more women engineers, more women that do the work, but then are also recognized for it. And perhaps I can share a personal story. Monica is looking at me saying there's a lot of questions, but it's good that you know. We were mandated by member states to organize an event on new technologies and the fourth industrial revolution. We had it at the General Assembly Hall in the month of November, if I'm not mistaken. And when we were putting the panel together, and Ambassador Morgan is right there, she was in charge of that, we were struggling because I don't see it in any panel where there is no gender parity. That's my basic principle. This is part of the gender champion, and we spent days making sure that we had women sitting in the panel of the fourth industrial revolution and the new technologies. It so happened that programs and agencies within the house, they said no, but you know the director is out of town, the director of X or Y is not here, and we started to ask that question: who wrote the report? Who wrote the report? It so happened that who wrote the report, who shaped the report, were women, but the directors were men. And since the directors were out of town, they were having difficulties participating. At the end, we ended up having a panel with the authors of the reports, you know, from our departments and agencies, and I think they were all women. At the end, it happened that there was only one man and the rest were women because they were the authors of the report. So this shouldn't continue to happen.
Thank you. Yoshita?
Thank you. Happy Women's Day. This is Yoshita Singh with Press Trust of India. My question is on the Security Council reforms. India has been at the forefront of pushing for Security Council reforms now for a very long time, saying that it rightly deserves a place at the UN High Table. It's been 10 years since the IGN process was started. What is your assessment? How do you see the reform process moving forward? It's been excruciatingly slow. Do you see countries like India, Germany, Japan, as permanent members of the Security Council, as when and if it's reformed? Thank you.
Well, this is a very good question because it's one of these questions where we have to repeat the answer a little bit. This is very much a member state-driven process. My role as president is to accompany, to lead, to make sure that the process continues, to make sure that it is inclusive, that it is transparent. I think that we have two excellent co-chairs, as you know, the ambassador of Luxembourg and the ambassador of the Emirates. They're both putting a lot of effort. They are working, engaging with all member states, trying to pull together the different positions, trying to look at the commonalities to see how we can tackle the issue in order to avoid the zero-sum game. It is not an easy issue. I want to be very open and frank with you. It is very divisive. It is contentious. It is true that people are getting impatient after 10 years of the IGN, but this is the process we have. And I think that we have to make sure that the process continues, that all member states engage, and we pull a little bit we push and push and push and walk the extra mile. And sometimes, perhaps I shouldn't be saying this because I'm supposed to be neutral, but sometimes we see the Security Council reform as an either-or and a black and white issue. But there are so many things that we can do to improve the Security Council working methods, and we can do it now without any major changes. And this is happening. I have a lot of hope on what the E10 are doing, the elected 10 members. I think that they are de facto making some meaningful changes in improving the working methods and the transparency of the Security Council.
Okay, let's go to you, and afterwards I'll go there. Yeah, I see your hands.
Thank you, Madam President. Hatim El-Gamasi from NewEgypt.tv. It's Women's International Day, so if you allow me to focus more on your experience as a woman in leading positions, and let me take you back a little bit to Ecuador when you were the Minister of Defense. You spoke to Forbes magazine over a week ago, and you said how they used to make fun of you as being a poet. I thought they would make fun of you more as a woman in that position. But a woman and a poet in a tough security or military position, how was it for you to handle generals and security personnel who mostly men? Thank you.
Well, I think this is a very, very nice question, and believe me that once you are in the position of exercising your decision-making capacity because you have earned the space, then things start to happen. It's true. I mean, no one talked about my academic background, about my experience as a public servant. They spoke about being a poet and being a female. And they made, and there were so many journal articles about that. But once I started to do my work, and it wasn't an easy job because I was appointed precisely to do a re-engineering and a reform of our armed forces in Ecuador. And believe me, no man was able to touch on the very powerful architecture of the armed forces in Ecuador. And I asked the president, I said, this is going to take me a year at least. It took me 3 years, not one. But when I left the ministry, I was a little tired, I have to say, but I actually did it. Now we have a modern armed forces with gender parity and gender sensitive policies, affirmative action for women that are in the military service, and we did a lot of very, very profound changes in the armed forces. And believe me, until this very day, when ¿cómo se dice? Ascensos happen. Huh? No, when the generals, the colonels become generals and all that, the promotions happen, I still get invited by them. I have an excellent, very respectful, very horizontal relationship with the high authorities of the military in Ecuador. So we need to use the space, and then we can very easily demonstrate that we are capable to do the job. That was my experience.
Nabil, Alura, I have all of you. Okay. I'm paying attention. Okay, Nabil, go ahead.
Thank you. Happy Women's Day to everyone. Madam President, I would like to ask you about the Arab region, Arab countries. Of course, we have a big problem in the region when it comes to women's participation in the decision-making process and in political entities in general. So I would like to hear your message to this on this in particular, please, and also on the representation of Arab women in the UN system. How much it's important for the region to have higher representation, Arab women in the UN system. Thank you.
Well, regarding the security situation in Arab countries, we follow very closely the developments of contentious and difficult situations in many parts of that region. We are seeing some positive developments, for example, in the case of Syria, with a new special envoy. I think that there is some unraveling of the problem that is going on, a series of conversations, the Constitutional Committee on the scenario. We see some positive developments. We see also in the case of Yemen some challenges, but also a political will to really look for a meaningful dialogue and a peaceful solution to the conflicts. I think that is the case. I am a strong believer of regional responses to regional crises. So I think that the region has a responsibility to address the conflict situations in that area. If you ask me, there is also hope in the Afghani peace process. There are some sheds of light around this very important process. And what we do at the UN is that we are honest brokers. We encourage dialogue. We encourage the possibility of true negotiations among all parties. I'm speaking in general because I think we don't have the time to go into the specifics, but I would say that it's never too late for dialogue, for negotiation. There is a strong need, for political will and a strong engagement for the regional actors also to be fully committed to peace processes. Regarding participation of Arab women in the UN, I think that we have a feminist Secretary General. That is a great advantage. He has really walked the talk. If you look at high-level management positions, he's done it, and he's taken the decision, and he's done it, including on the ratio of country representatives of the UN. We're still we need to do some work still in the lower levels, at the country level, at the ground level. We need more women mediators, more women peacekeepers. It is extremely important, and I think that we are aware of that, and there is a big effort behind it. Regarding regional representations, you're also very right. I don't have the numbers with me, but I think that all regions should be represented. All women from different regions should be represented in the high-level management positions in the organization, but also at the field level.
Okay, I'll have Errol here, and then Betu. Okay, go ahead, Errol. Okay.
Thank you very much. Happy Women's Day to everybody. Madam President, you mentioned women on the senior level at the United Nations. Now that we reached that parity, actually, and we are a little bit beyond, not beyond, but over, actually.
A little bit.
How do you, I know it's difficult to measure, but can you express what you think, what is the main contribution now, and what is the difference in solving of world problems? And also, since we are there, what do you say? Your colleague from Egypt mentioned poetry, and I would like to ask you, can you comment on that American maxim, I would say, that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose? Is that applies for UN as well?
Well, and I love that phrase myself. Regarding your first comment on gender parity, I am a strong believer that it is not only about numbers and to have the numbers right. I think that the quota systems, the affirmative action policies are extremely highly needed at some point, but it is, of course, a transitional process. Once you have the numbers right, then you need to look at the quality and the delivery capacity. And I think that as women, we have shown over and over again that we do have this delivery capacity, this possibility of being actors factors of change, of doing things right. And I think that when you look at the peacekeeping operations, the outstanding role of women, if you look at conflicts that have been resolved with a high participation of women, I mean, there are numbers and studies that have been made that when women participate in peace processes as mediators, usually the agreements are more long-lasting and more sustainable over time. And this is not essentialist feminism. It is the numbers and reality. About poetry and prose, I think that I've always said that in politics we need a little more poetry. We need more beauty in politics. We need to bring poetry into politics because poetry, what it gives you, it's a special lens to look at reality, a special sensitivity to be connected to the needs and the pain of people. And if politics is not able to deliver and to respond to the pain and the needs of people, is useless. So in my condition, and I'm not ashamed to say, yes, indeed, I am primarily a poet, and a poet that has these antennas, these ways of looking at the world in a special way. I don't want to be essentialistic, but an essentialist, but it really does help. And the other place where where poetry helps is with giving the weight and the meaning to words. We tend to say, and we say, we need to walk the talk. I would say we need to talk first. And the words and narratives can really shape the world. And I'm a strong believer on the power of words.
Thank you, Madam President Beto. And then I go here, and I have Masoud there, and also Ali, Ahmed. Go ahead, Beto.
Thank you, Madam President. You are one of the few presidents of the General Assembly, and this organization itself, the UN, hasn't seen any female secretary generals. So my question is, would you yourself consider running as SG? And also, speaking of multilateralism, do you think a female secretary general protect multilateralism better and make the UN a better place, which has been failing in preventing conflicts in recent years?
Well, I think that I would say only two very strong messages. Number one, that yes, I think it would be desirable, that to have a female Secretary General at one point. But what we have now, we have to be very proud of. And I have to tell you, very from the bottom of my heart, I truly believe that we cannot have a better Secretary General. He's really fit for purpose. He makes us, I travel with him, I watch him on the ground, working, doing, speaking, negotiating, and I really feel proud that us member states at some point, once with more power than others to elect them, but we have a great Secretary General, a person that is fit for purpose, that is really capable of facing huge challenges that we have ahead of us, and that is it's great. If a woman can be a better defender of multilateralism than a man, I think I don't think so. Really, it depends on the person. And we found, and we elected, and we appointed, and we trusted a wonderful Secretary General for difficult times. We have a person that is a very seasoned diplomat with a lot of experience, a public servant that knows inside out the United Nations. He was a great High Commissioner for Refugees. So I think that he's, the perfect person to have now. My personal future plans, I smile because I have so much work to do. I don't even know what I'm going to do after September when my tenure is over. So I haven't considered that possibility.
Thank you. Go ahead. Yes, please. So you have your microphone? Mm-hmm. Okay. If you can say your name and your outlet. Thank you.
Madam President, I'm Susan Modares. I'm an independent correspondent resident here at the United Nations. Happy International Women's Day to you, and thank you, Monica. Madam President, what do you think is the most significant barrier to young female leadership today, since we will be discussing this in the weeks to come? And also, what are or is the challenge that the generation behind you or behind us will face? And I guess it's just to shy away from the cliche analogy, what would be your advice to your 25-year-old self? That goes in line with my second question. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. I would say perhaps number one is that we really need to come to grips to girls that are excluded from schooling and from quality education. That's a number one issue. It's part of the 2030 agenda, and we are far behind. I gave the numbers and the statistics just now at the commemoration of the Women's Day, and that should not continue. Millions of girls that do not have access to school. So that's number one. Number two is that the millennials, the younger generations, they have access to proper education, but then the problem is opportunities and creation of new jobs and the skills that are necessary. That is true for millennials, men and women. And the third issue is that I heard the experience of the current Vice President of Panama when she was asked to run for elections for Vice President. Her daughter was crying, and basically her concern was to her mother that when women, us, are out in the public, we really are mistreated by public opinion. There is something that is called gender-based political violence. And I see that younger generations are afraid of being put in that situation. And it's hard sometimes. As politicians, when we are out there, very rarely people recognize our achievements. They sometimes make comments about the way we dress, our hair. They make comments about issues that don't have anything to do with your job, your responsibility, your capacity to deliver. And I think that we should start discussing seriously about political persecution and discrimination for women in politics. And I think this is part of the purpose for the 12th of March, to have younger generations look at current presidents to share their own personal experiences and ask the new generations not to shy away from politics, to be out there, to have strong voices. And it's impossible for all young women to want to become presidents, but to be out there in the public sphere, speaking out loud, demanding the rights to be respected. And I think this is happening very much. This is really happening. We see so many very strong and loud, intelligent women's voices out there.
Thank you. I will have to ask you to, unfortunately, limit your questions to one question so we can accommodate everybody. Go ahead, Ali, and then I have Ahmed here and Evelyn. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam President. Happy Women's Day. We all know about the efforts that's being made by the Secretary General, by even yourself or others, but some argue that the UN system is still patriarchal and it needs some regulations probably to keep this equality or gender parity at all levels, in the senior levels and even, as you mentioned, below. Do you agree that the UN system is patriarchal, and why, and how to change it? Thank you.
Well, what I would say, my dear friend, is that society is still patriarchal. And the United Nations sometimes can be a reflection of what society is. The good part of the story is that there is full awareness of that is the case. And the good part of the story is that we have an executive that is very mindful of what the things that need to be changed, and he has proven that we can change. Of course, there is still a lot to do, especially on a very sensitive issue regarding harassment, for example, violence and discrimination within this House. And the Secretary General has taken the right decisions. He has a team only looking at the issues, establishing transparent mechanisms, accountability mechanisms within the House. And of course, we can always do better, but there is the understanding, the knowledge, and the response capacity of the organization. And of course, I think that we should be the example of a better society. The UN has to be a microcosm of what a dreamed society should be. And I think we are trying hard, and that's what needs to be commended. It's also in the hands of member states as well, but I think that there is full awareness of what needs to be done.
Evelyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Monica. Good to see you again, Madam President. Speaking of men who have messed everything up, do you intend to bring up Venezuela at all? You speak the right language, and the Security Council is deadlocked. Do you see that coming up in the GA?
Well, I am in the hands of member states for that particular issue. I know that the resolutions in the Security Council, haven't prospered. We are following closely the situation in Venezuela. I speak very often with the Secretary General. I think that the United Nations is responding. We have deployed all our humanitarian architecture in Venezuela. We're working there. That on the humanitarian side of the situation. But on the political side, there are several initiatives that we should be watching to see what happens. The Secretary General has offered his good offices when the time is ripe and when all parties are really committed to have an honest negotiation. I mean, we are ready. We are ready as an organization to take part. We have to keep in mind that on the 11th of March, the Office of the High Commissioner is sending a group of experts to Venezuela, and we will see how the situation unravels. And I am following closely the developments in Venezuela.
Okay, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Ahmed Fathi, American Television News. Let me please get you back to the Middle East a little bit. Saudi Arabia, there is a group of women activists who have been jailed since May for nothing, just for calling to give the women the right to drive. Although this was given by the government by a royal decree, and yet they were imprisoned. Reports coming that they are subjected to electric shocks, beatings, sleep deprivation, and in some cases sexual assault, rape, etc. Their families are terrified to speak out, and this is falling on deaf ears of the Saudi regime. As a woman leader, do you have a message to these jailed women in Saudi Arabia and to the Saudi government at the same time? Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. And I'll get another question here in the back. Yeah. I'll have all of you. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. I have my question is regarding a report that's coming out on Monday from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute regarding arms sales and the increase of arms sales, especially for Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia and Israel and other countries. Which role do you see that the UN could play, or could better? Which things could the UN could do in order to tackle this issue? And do you see that women in this regard have also a special role, or they could do more, including engaging women in this issue? Thank you.
So I will answer these two questions perhaps together. On the Saudi Arabia question, we say this and we repeat that we have a very powerful tool, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we have also the Vienna Convention and the Vienna Agreements, which make very clear that human rights and human dignity is universal and has to be respected and fulfilled by every country around the world. So human rights is not something that has to be adapted or shaped. It has to be with human dignity, and human rights have to be respected in every corner of the globe. Regarding what would be the message to women, not only in Saudi Arabia, but women around the world that have seen and suffered because their rights and their dignity is not respected, is to use the institutional architecture to really speak loud, to use civil society organizations and human rights defenders to work for them, on them, and to multiply their voices. And yet again, I repeat, our human rights architecture as United Nations, the Office of the High Commissioner, the Human Rights Council, the special procedures, the treaty bodies, they have all to work together to ensure that human rights are respected in every corner of the planet.
May I have a very quick follow-up, please?
Regarding the arms sales,
just a moment. Sorry.
We can come back to you, but regarding the report, I think that there is a very strong connection between arms race and investment for sustainable development. And I think that we need to start talking and having this conversation. We say that there are billions of dollars that are needed to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, and that includes, of course, the specific Sustainable Development Goals on gender equality and the rights of women. So I think it goes hand in hand, that there are issues that we have to really address. We have instruments that we have passed ourselves as member states. The arms treaty, how is it called? I say that I know that. Huh? Well, the NPT, but the new treaty on the total elimination of nuclear weapons. There is also the treaty on conventional arms. So we do have the architecture, and we have to make sure that we put it in place.
We have to move. Stefano, come back to you. Stefano, and then afterwards we'll have Prensa Latina.
Yes. Stefano Vaccara, Voce di New York, Radio Radicale in Rome. I think it's related with could be related with your trip in Europe, a recent trip. If you look at maps, the ranking, world ranking of gender equality, you will see that the best ranking country are in the North European country, and then maybe Canada. He's trying to, and some other countries, but really is impressive. How you see those Finland, Norway, Sweden, then you go up Iceland. Is impressive. So you have been recently in Europe. Freedom rights are not usually given as a gift. You have to fight for it. So what happened with those women? I'm thinking, I'm wondering. When you meet women around the world, do you think that women in those countries that have equality rights, where women finally accomplish equal rights, did they fight in a different way? Do you have any advice for women that fighting, let's say in Saudi Arabia or other places, to find the way to finally reach those equality?
Well, I think that you can be right when we talk about gender equality and women's rights indexes and numbers. It is true that Nordic countries are really they stand out. For example, the country number 1 in abolishing the pay gap between men and women is Iceland. That's the country number 1. Iceland is very up north. But I think that there are very, very strong and interesting developments also in the global south about, the empowerment of women, about women in roles of leadership and of high responsibility. And I think it's less and less evident that the North is doing better and the South is doing less good. We have countries like Rwanda, for example. Rwanda has reached 50-50 parity in their parliament, and that is Rwanda. Ethiopia has the first ever president in the history of Ethiopia. And you see a lot of developments and a lot of movement in terms of women's rights and the political empowerment of women around the globe. I mean, there are, very serious changes that are happening north and south, east and west. And I think we have to look at the case by case. And in some areas where women's rights were really at the forefront and in the avant-garde, we are seeing also some backlashes. And because of my own position, I cannot tell you names, but just we have to look at what is happening in some parts of the world where there is very clear backlash on women's rights and women empowerment.
I'm going to have a teamwork here very quickly, Masood and then Carla, and I have you
sorry,
here.
Monica,
Go ahead, Masood.
Please, I need to do the follow-up. Madam President, you mentioned in your answer on my question on the jailed Saudi women, you mentioned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Just newsflash. Saudi Arabia never signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights since 1946. Saudi Arabia have been a member in the UN Human Rights Council for several terms. I don't know, this is a bizarre world of rotations and deals between member states. The other thing, the Geneva Convention, there is also another Geneva Convention dating back to 1962, which organized the consular and diplomatic immunity, yet the Saudi consulate in Istanbul was used as a scene for a brutal murder of a journalist. Just news flash and an update. Thank you.
I think it is a comment that is very, it is a follow-up to your question, and you're right.
We need to move on. Masood, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador, my name is Masood Haider. I represent Daily Dawn newspaper of Pakistan. I just wanted to so congratulations, but unfortunately, as you know, today in Great Britain, first female genital mutilator was convicted and jailed. Can you please tell us what is the situation of female genital mutilation worldwide, and has it come under control? Where is it? Because today it happened in Great Britain, because they found it. Now, where is it going? Because it started in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, I will have Prince Latina and then Carla, and we will have to wrap up, but I see your hands. Go ahead, please. Prince Latina.
Ahead, Madam.
Yeah, after you. She's going to answer you.
I will come back to your question, and I think that we're taking more than one.
Yes,
and then
correct, yes. Go ahead, Prince Latina, please.
Iris Frade from Prince Latina News Agency. Thanks for the briefing. I'm going to talk in Spanish. Hay temas históricamente pendientes en la Asamblea General, como la creación del Estado de Palestina, la independencia de Puerto Rico. ¿Qué se ha hecho al respecto? ¿Cómo se puede avanzar al respecto? Muchas gracias.
Okay, good. And then Carla, please, go ahead. You have your mic. You need your mic on. Thank you, Carla. Go ahead.
One of your most important contributions in your position has been your concern and emphasis on the scandalous global economic inequality. And what do you plan to do in your remaining term to try and address this and hopefully make a difference? And also, as a Latin American, well, it's not confined to Latin America, there have been many governments that have tried to reduce the inequality within their countries, many of whom were subjected to sanctions by my country. So can you also address the impact of sanctions on increasing economic inequality?
Thank you very much. And yes, let's take these questions here. And if we get more time, I'm going to get to the three of you. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much. Madam President.
Okay, regarding... Where was the gentleman?
Yeah, he's sitting next to Mark Seddon.
Oh,
so
yes, you changed
Masood.
places. Okay.
We're going to answer you now.
You asked about numbers on women's genital mutilation. If I'm not mistaken, it's 200 million girls and women alive living in 30 countries. And this is a phenomenon that I think that the international community, the UN agencies and programs are working on that. It is a terrible situation. I think that there has been a constant and sustained work on that regard. To be very honest with you, I wasn't aware of the piece of news you shared with us that there was a case in the UK. But wherever it happens, I think that we should be ashamed. We're not talking about one or two. We're talking about 200 million girls and women in 30 countries that have been victims of these.
Yes, Madam Ambassador, how about the Nigerian girls who were kidnapped by the militia and then some of them returned, some of them were not returned? Do you have any report on that? Nigerian girls.
Yes, of course. I have the information. There are international mechanisms. We have a whole architecture of institutional mechanisms of response capacity from member states, from the UN, from the international community, of course, and zero tolerance for any form of violence against women and girls around the globe, no matter where it happens. It's the same response that I gave to the gentleman regarding the case of Saudi Arabia. And the issue of no impunity, I think it's something that we need to work on a little more. I dropped something.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think it was my pen, but okay. There were two other questions. One on Palestine and decolonization issues for committee work. I think that these are long-standing issues. I always say and repeat that the Palestinian question is an open wound of the international community, is a pending debt that we have. There are several efforts that are being, deployed, but certainly if we are talking about a implementation challenge, we have to talk about implementation challenges regarding the resolutions both of the Security Council and the General Assembly regarding the Palestinian issue. We follow closely. It's really painful what is happening there. We are working as a UN architecture. We're there. We are on the ground, and we are really insisting on the need for a peaceful negotiation and a dialogue regarding the Palestinian situation. Coming back to your question about inequalities. I think that we have all seen the data and the numbers on inequalities. Unfortunately, the inequality gap has grown recently. We recently saw the last inequality index, which is really, we have to feel ashamed of what is happening. We are capable of creating more and more and more wealth and more prosperity, but at the same time to concentrate the wealth and the prosperity in the hands of very few. I think this is one of the the biggest structural challenges for implementation of Agenda 2030. We will have the opportunity during this high-level political forum to tackle specifically the issue of inequalities and structural responses to that.
A final question. Satu have been very patient. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. My question is about what was your first start point for you to make aware of the gender equality in your lifetime? Because your long experience to promote gender parity, especially when in a political career during the defense ministry. But before that, was that any? What is your start point for you to motivate the gender parity in your life?
Well, thank you for this question, but I think that personal experience counts a great deal. When I started as a very young activist, environmental activist, I used to work with indigenous peoples in the Amazon, where I lived for quite a while, and I realized how difficult it was for indigenous women in my country. I saw that when working on conservation, the role of local communities in protected areas, economic empowerment of women in the rural areas. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced it. And as a public servant, wherever I went, sometimes when I sat the first day at a ministry, when I was foreign minister in 2007, and I said, how many female ambassadors do we have? Because I needed to appoint ambassadors, and there were only 2 out of 68 at the time. And they said, well, but it's normal, it's normal because, women, they don't like the diplomatic career. They don't like it because they have to travel and they prefer to stay home. This is the kind of explanations you receive. And I said, well, no way. I mean, I want the numbers. I want to check. I want to see how is the promotion scale. I want to see how we assess this. And I passed an affirmative action policy for promotions and for the way we did promotions at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I discovered, for example, that when female diplomats married with the male diplomats, in 99% of the cases, it was them, the female diplomats, that had to give up their careers to allow their husbands to travel in diplomatic missions. So I changed that, and we passed a regulation to if you have a wife that is a diplomat, both should travel to the same country. 2 different posts, one in working at the consulate level, other in the trade mission, or the other in the diplomatic mission. But this regulation also exists. When I arrived to the Ministry of Defense, it was the same thing. Women, they're afraid. They don't like the military career. They are afraid. They're not fit for purpose. It's very tough, physically, the preparation, so they don't like. I said, I don't take that for an answer. And we pass an affirmative action, a quota system that is going to increase. It is increasing. It has increased already, at a rapid pace, the inclusion of female members of the military. So wherever you go, you realize that inequalities, that discrimination happens. In the 21st century, it continues to happen. So we have to really be very, ¿cómo se dice? Have the decision, the commitment, and actually do it. That has been my experience. And that's why also when I came here, I said gender equality and the empowerment of women and women's rights is going to be one of my 7 priorities, because we still are, we still have a long way to go.
Thank you, Madam President, for your time. I know I see some hands, but we have to move on because Stéphane Dujarric will be here very, very soon. So we're going to have to talk to you on probably a bilateral after that. So thank you very much. And your last words, Madam President.
Yeah, my last words would be, please, either in person. I've met the majority of you in bilateral interviews. And I'm absolutely available. I work a lot, I travel a lot, but I am available to you. If you have any feedback, anything that you think I should improve or look at more specifically or work more on certain issues, please let me know. In a personal basis, even if you don't want to interview me, just give me some feedback. My doors are always open. I'm busy, but some of you, the majority of you that have come to my office, that I said the first day my presidency is going to be an open door presidency, and I really mean it, and I still mean it. I'm in the 50% of my tenure, and I want my remaining 50% to be fruitful and to work in favor of this organization and the people we serve.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Thanks.